Welcome to Mental Health Matters, a podcast of KU Leuven Healthy. With this podcast, we will share inspiring stories to keep young researchers in a good mental shape. I'm Jan, PJ, and this is Robyn.
Hello.
We are both two young researchers at the KU Leuven and we will host this podcast.
In each episode, we will talk with a Ph.D. student or a postdoc of the KU Leuven about their health and well-being. Through the different episodes, we will try to find answers on different questions like how do you stay confident and resilient in a highly competitive world?
How do you deal with stress, isolation or anxiety?
How do you create a good work-life balance?
And how do you stay motivated during your research process? Find out the answers together with us and get inspired. Discover the advice of different experts of KU Leuven on the broad range of topics. And at the end of each episode, Robyn and I try out an exercise or some advice under the guidance of our guests.
So let's discover new habits to stay healthy and in a good mental shape.
Hi Robyn, how is your morning going?
Actually quite fine. I always start my morning with a coffee and then I take 20 minutes to slowly drink it and wake up so I can start my day off fresh.
It's a bit different from me. I just like to wake up when I feel ready to wake up, if you could say it like that. But that often leads to having to rush to work.
Okay, and I also wonder what the morning routine of our next guest is. And Michalina is here with us today, and she will talk about stress and specifically on how to bounce back from it. So let's listen what she has to say about it. Hi Michalina, welcome. It's very nice to have you here in our podcast today. So every episode we start with asking some dilemma questions just to get to know our guest of the day. So are you ready for the first dilemma?
Yeah, let's go.
Do you like winter or summer?
Winter.
And why?
I love Christmas time more than I love insects time. So I prefer winter.
That's an interesting take.
Right?
Look at it, yeah. And do you like taking the stairs or the elevator?
The stairs, but it depends how many. In Antwerpen Centraal, I would rather take the escalator. There are many stairs there.
You're missing the beautiful view.
True, but if you take these stairs every day, you just need a change.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, then the final dilemma. Do you like sleeping in or do you like to wake up very early?
Definitely sleeping in. I think I don't have problems to wake up early, but if I can choose, I will definitely sleep in to just start my day slowly with like some slow routines, breakfast, long breakfast, watching something or reading a book.
We also want to know a bit more about who you are as a researcher. What's your research about?
I'm a first-year Ph.D. student at KU Leuven in the Center for the Psychology of Learning and Experimental Psychopathology. And my research currently is about the interplay of the mechanisms involved in the transition from adaptive fear to anxiety disorders.
And I was just wondering, what do you think being a first-year Ph.D. student makes it very challenging?
I think there are many things you probably know yourself that make PhD challenging. And the first one that comes into my head is that the PhD, at least to me and listening to the stories of some of my colleagues, is a very turbulent period of time. So meaning that one day you might be very content with your work, you might be happy what you're doing, and on the other day everything fails and you just want to go home. And these fluctuations, at least for me, they're sometimes difficult to handle. Other thing that comes into my mind is that PhD students are seen, and I think they are, really ambitious, motivated, and curious people. But these traits come at a certain price. So because of these traits, you're often reminded that you should always aim high, that you should always deal with difficulties, and that you should never give up. And I think this narrative makes it sometimes very difficult and doesn't give you any space to feel all of these negative emotions like frustration, disappointment, and sadness.
Yeah, I'm a bit impressed by the fact that you already know so much about the PhD life and about yourself as well, that you can reflect on those topics. I think when I was in my first year, I was just diving in the literature and everything I had to do without standing still and think about all those other aspects. You lived in different places. Do you think there's a cultural difference in how we talk about our mental health?
Yes, definitely. I lived actually in Poland, in the Netherlands, in Belgium, so there are definitely differences that I can point out. You do need to remember that I'm a foreigner, so I have my own cultural biases, so I don't want to offend anybody. It's just my personal experience that I want to share. So one of the things that I've noticed in the Netherlands is that Dutch people are very direct. They're very straightforward, especially in giving their feedback. It was a bit difficult for me at the beginning because in Poland, we really hide behind this curtain of politeness. We try to do everything to not even take a chance to hurt somebody. So at the beginning, it was difficult for me. But at the end, I think I started to appreciate it. I've realized that by receiving a very direct, straightforward feedback, I can appreciate my strengths more, but also improve my weaknesses. And that it comes easier to me because I don't need to look for this hidden meaning behind words because everything is just straight and direct. And I think also through this directness and honesty, Dutch people don't have that many taboo topics that they often very easily talk about personal matters. It's something at least that I observed. So that's something that I observed in the Netherlands. Whereas in Belgium, I think, well, I definitely can't say that much because I only moved here in August. But one thing that I observed is that at least in my surrounding, people really care about their work-life balance. And they really are really proud of maintaining it. People in my surrounding have families, hobbies, and passions. And it's very visible that they can handle all of these aspects of their life well. And it makes me proud to be a part of this environment, to be a part of this community as well.
Do you also value that a lot, this work-life balance then?
I think I do. It doesn't come to me that easy, not always. And you all know that PhD is not really a 9-to-5 type of job, and that's it's often very well received if you're running behind some deadlines, or if, I don't know, you're conducting an experiment, that you will work after hours or you will work on the weekends. But I try to do my best to maintain this mystic work-life balance.
You mentioned Dutch people are more direct. What do you mean exactly by that? How do you give more open and honest feedback?
I think it's not really about like honesty, because I think even a feedback that is, I don't know, more said in a more polite way, it can be honest as well. I think more that in the Netherlands, what I experience is that your weaknesses and your strengths are put in a really straightforward way, put on a table, basically. And I think it's very difficult to explain, and I think you just need to experience that. But it was definitely something that caused me a bit of difficulties because, as I've said, it's not something that we do in Poland. But I think as an advice, and maybe to first thing, just to prepare the list of weaknesses and the list of strengths that you can communicate in the feedback. And I think to give a good feedback also means that you can communicate it well, and that the other person can receive it well, because I think sometimes there is an imbalance in that. The thing that I maybe didn't mention before is that it also taught me to not take everything so personal, and just to clearly listen what the other person communicates to me.
Do you have some advice to create an open feedback environment here at the KU Leuven or in any research workspace?
So far, I actually received very open feedback. I'm just right after my first progress evaluation. But definitely first, at least for me, first step is to create very open and safe space where things can be shared in a direct, straightforward way. And that both sides are not scared to speak up and feel that they can be honest about their experiences.
I can imagine you also have stress. How does that manifest for you?
I think when I'm stressed, I'm definitely overwhelmed, and I can't come up with any potential solutions for my problems. It's all just chaos in my head. And in my case, it also manifests through my migraines. The more stressed I am, the more migraines I have. It's just how it works for me. If I could just choose one word to describe my stress, would be definitely chaos. I just can't think straight.
And how do you try to cope with this chaos or these feelings of stress?
The first thing that I do is when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm stressed, and if it's related to my work, I always try to organize myself. I'm definitely a freak planner. I need to plan everything in my life if I can. So I try to do a little to-do list or just a small schedule. And it helps me to clear my mind a bit and to, in a way, regain control over the situation. Because if things are written, if they're in a way scheduled, I think I have a subjective, better sense of control over the situation. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I try to give myself a break. Of course, it's not always possible, but if it's possible, I try to go for a walk or just shift my attention to something else. Because if I'm stressed and overwhelmed, I'm usually often tired. So this is the way I can kind of clear my head and do something else for a moment.
How did you notice that your migraines come from the stress? Was it difficult to link those two? When did you find out that the stress caused your migraines?
I think it was rather quite early because I'm overall, I would say, a rather anxious person. So lots of things can stress me out very easily. But I think it was just through observation and that I was just trying to pinpoint a moment why I have migraines in more stressful periods. And just through observation, I've realized that one of the reasons is when I'm stressed and when I'm overwhelmed, I have headaches.
How do you notice, Robyn, that you have stress?
At first, I didn't notice it, but now I notice when I have difficulty breathing or it felt like I had some pressure in my chest, then I noticed like, okay, calm down and just take a deep breath and make things in order in your mind. And what also helps me a lot, something you also mentioned, is planning things. But on the other hand, I also notice that it also can make me more stressed sometimes, because if then my planning is, I can't follow my planning or something comes up and I can't like do something that I had in mind, it also offers me more stress. I don't know if that's something you also experience.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's why I use the word subjective control. I don't think I regain my objective control over the situation. It's more in my head that if I have things written on a paper, it seems more structured. It's more logical to me. And I think that's why it gives me a bit of subjective sense of control. But I do agree that sometimes planning can make you more stressed because you might plan so many things that are not really realistic for you to make. So usually I also try to adjust my plans. I try to not be so rigid towards them, but it's sometimes difficult, especially if you lay something down on a paper and it's so perfect on the paper and then you realize that maybe it's not really possible to make it.
Yeah, it's funny because last week I actually put on a blank page on the wall and just wrote down all my big to-dos just so that they were out of sight my head and I don't have to think, oh, this and this and this. It's just now on paper, so I know what I have to do, but I don't put any deadlines on it or only the actual deadlines. I don't plan when I will do it, but it's interesting to see how it interplays and everyone uses it as well. So are there also other ways that you try to handle your stress besides planning or writing it down?
So the one thing that I mentioned, making a little break for myself, even if it's just a short walk. And another way that definitely works for me is speaking to people that are important to me, that are valuable to me. I truly believe that when you share your problems, you already make them smaller. So you don't need to even receive any advice from people, but just by sharing them, they become smaller, at least to me.
What would you then suggest for other PhDs who are also having these feelings of stress? What would you say that they can do?
I think it's a very individual thing. It's very individual advice because for everybody, different things works, right? But definitely sharing your issues and speaking about difficulties that you experience with your family, with your friends, but also other fellow PhD students that probably have experienced the same things in the past. I think it's really helpful just building this very strong social support network. When we have strong connections with people, they can share empathy with us, also help us to shift our attention and just simply show us that we are not alone in this fight that we are having. So speaking to people and sharing these problems is definitely something that I would advise, although it is difficult to do so.
I was just wondering, because is that something that goes easy, you think, being a PhD, like speaking about these vulnerable things, these feelings you have?
Definitely not, especially since, as I've mentioned before, we are often referred as a very privileged group, very ambitious, wise group. So sometimes I think it's difficult to show that you can be a bit vulnerable as well. But I think it's important to fight these unrealistic beliefs of difficult things that we are experiencing. One of them is, for example, that asking for help is a weakness. I truly think that it's a sign of being brave and a mature thing to do. It's something that shows you recognize your needs and that you protect yourself. And it doesn't make you a less competent PhD student. I think actually asking for help and receiving help might help you at the end to deal with all of these difficulties that you experience.
I think it's interesting at this point if we also listen to a quote of an expert we talked to, namely Kathleen van der Gucht, professor at the KU Leuven, and let's hear what she has to say.
Our reactions are often based on our automatic habitual patterns. Through mindfulness, we learn to recognize how we habitually react to pleasant experiences by wanting more of them, and to unpleasant experiences by pushing them away. Learning to recognize these automatic patterns, especially as felt body sensations, gives us the possibility to respond consciously rather than to follow unconscious reactive habit patterns. This process of recognizing reactivity is based on the Buddhist teaching of the two darts. The first dart is direct physical or emotional pain, which is unavoidable. The second dart is how we add to our suffering through the way we react to or think about the event. The practice of mindfulness trains us to step back and notice how we are feeding this second dart. This is also called decentering. Training the ability to decenter is one of the central working mechanisms in mindfulness.
That's actually a very interesting quote. What do you think about it, Michalina?
It's also very interesting for me, especially since I did the mindfulness course with Professor Kathleen van der Gucht. So I do try to implement some of the techniques that she mentioned in the quote, although it's very difficult for me because I'm a rather impulsive person, so I don't think it comes to me that easy.
Can you exemplify a little bit this technique you learned?
So one of the techniques that I more or less learned, I definitely didn't master it, but at least I learned it, is to recognize that the tone of the situation or the stimulus that you're experiencing. For example, you're in a situation, you enter the situation and you recognize whether the situation is unpleasant, pleasant, or neutral to you. And based on this first feeling that you have, feeling of the tone, you can, in a way, more consciously decide on what reaction from you will follow. This is something that we were practicing during the mindfulness course to recognize these tones of the situations. And I realized that I was able to more accurately recognize unpleasant situations than pleasant ones. But it helped me a bit to stop myself for a second, as she mentioned, decenter yourself for a moment, and to try to make more conscious decision how to react. So as an example of this pin, if you step on a pin, of course, it's painful, but the way your reaction will follow, it doesn't necessarily need to involve that you're angry at the other person. I think if you just stop for a moment, maybe you can make a more conscious decision. Not fully conscious, but at least more conscious.
And how do you practice it? Because I can imagine if somebody is giving you feedback or doing something, you can't say like, okay, wait a minute, I'm just experiencing what is happening now, and I will choose my reaction based on that. Is there something else you do in the evening or in the morning or separately to practice those things?
I think it's, I put it as a conscious decision, but I don't think it's in a way fully conscious. At least during the mindfulness course, we practiced it to learn how to do it and later on hopefully to implement it as a more habitual thing. But at the beginning, we were, for example, asked to focus on the situations that we are experiencing or the stimuli that are coming to us, and then realized, oh, is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? If it's pleasant, we were taught to say to ourselves, like, it's okay that it's pleasant. If it's unpleasant, it's also okay to acknowledge that, yeah, this situation is unpleasant. It's natural that it's unpleasant to me. And I think then when you acknowledge that, if you even say it in your mind, I think this is what makes the decision maybe more conscious, because you are aware what you're experiencing. It's not just like flowing. I think sometimes we experience our life on an autopilot. And if we can really stop for a moment and try to consciously think what's happening to me, then we can make this decision.
I can really relate with what you said about the automatic pilot, and it's also what Kathleen was saying, that we have a doing mode, but also a being mode, and realizing that sometimes you're just doing stuff, for example, driving to work without paying attention to the beautiful sunrise or to everything that's happening around you. It's something that I've learned as well, that sometimes you just have to switch off of doing things and start feeling things and just being in the moment. Do you do something in the morning or in the evening to practice more?
There are some things that I try to implement, talking about this doing and being mode. I've also realized that it's something that if you are in this autopilot mode, you often don't even remember that, I don't know, you took a shower, for example. So sometimes I try to slow down and be more mindful towards the activities that I'm doing. So even, for example, taking a shower or eating a meal, breakfast, I've realized that sometimes while I'm taking a shower or eating breakfast, I already plan things for the day. I'm going through my head, what do I need to do? What's going to happen during the day? Instead of just enjoying delicious food or just enjoying water on my skin. So being mindful towards small activities, it's something that I think might help you as well to slow down. But as I've said, it's difficult because our mind wants us to plan. It helps us to go through the day. So sometimes it's difficult to slow it down for a moment.
It is an eye-opening to have the state of being and the state of doing what you were saying. But do you also have other practices that you perform?
In the moments when I experience stress, definitely, but let's say not a stressful situation, more a stressful period. What I do is that I try to remember about the things that I'm grateful for. And it might sound a bit corny or mainstream, but I really think it helps. It reminds you of things that you can appreciate in your life, and it gives you strength to deal through this difficult period that you're experiencing. So even just simply before going to bed, listing 3 things that you're grateful for can be quite helpful, just to remind yourself what you already have. At least for me, I usually focus on the interactions that I have with people that I love or people that I value. But it can be also small things. So today, I'm definitely grateful that my train wasn't delayed. It's very rare in Belgium, I've realized. And I travel here every day from Antwerp. So I'm very happy that I could be on time and could grab a coffee on the way. So it's a small thing, but I think it's already powerful, at least for me.
So now we talked about how, for example, a list could also help us to deal with feelings of stress. Do you maybe have a final personal tip?
So as I've also mentioned, talking to important people in your life definitely helps to make problems smaller. But of course, these are all individual advice. Everybody has their individual ways of dealing with stress. And I think these techniques, how to deal with stress, are even more important than the nature of the stressor itself, because we all experience failures and difficult situations, but the way they affect us, it's something individual. So some people might develop mental health issues after experiencing an adversity in their life, whereas the other people will recover from it and move on. I think this is something that I find it very interesting as well in psychology, because for the decades, psychology has focused on pathology, on etiology of mental disorders. Why do we develop mental disorders? But what I find interesting, worth investigating, and something that is a hot topic now, is why we don't develop mental disorders. What do we have that is protective for us? How we are protected from mental disorders? So in other words, resilience. How can we bounce from the adversity?
And how do you try to protect your mental health?
I think that's a difficult question, but there are techniques to do it. I didn't make them up. And one of them definitely is to try to learn how to think as an optimist. And it sounds like a slogan a bit, but there is an easy exercise, or fairly easy exercise, that it's possible to do. Every time you experience a small, difficult situation, and start with smaller ones, you can try to interpret the situation as something local, that it's just this situation that's difficult, not your whole life. That's something that you can change. And I think it already puts a bit more optimistic light on it if you see this situation from this perspective. The other thing that it's possible to build your resilience, to protect yourself, build strong relationships and authentic relationships with people. So this social support system, it's not only about having a support system, it's about really building and fostering strong relationships, authentic relationships with people. And it's something that comes with time and huge effort and investment. I see it in myself. I'm an international PhD student, and I left my country to come here and to study. And fostering relationships with people that are still in Poland, it's something challenging for me, but it's definitely worth it. And it helps you to overcome difficult situations in life if you have people that you can talk to and that can provide you with their support.
So yeah, and if you don't have friends around, what I sometimes do is I go for a walk and then I just talk to myself in English. I don't know why, I'm a Dutch-speaking person, but when I switch my brain off and I start to speak English about the issues or the things that I'm feeling, it helps me to reflect on them. I find that very useful as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's good that you talk to yourself as your friend, that you're kind to yourself. I think it also helps in other parts of life. For example, what helps me to pay attention to my work-life balance is every time I feel that my work-life balance is a bit asymmetric, I try to also talk to myself as I am my friend, and I try to present my schedule and listen to it as it was a schedule of my friend. And the question is, do I approve it? Am I concerned of it? It's a quick reality check that you can do to see if you are not overwhelming yourself with work. Because if you wouldn't recommend this lifestyle to your friend, then you probably shouldn't recommend it to yourself.
Okay, so I think we actually came to the end of our podcast episode. And at the end, PJ and I always try out an exercise or listen to some advice of our guest, which we think can help our listeners as well.
Yeah, and since you mentioned the idea of being grateful for the small things, I think it would be nice if we can try that out here and now.
The first thing that you need to do is really to stop for a moment and think about the things you are grateful for. And I think that I mentioned before that it can be really small things. It doesn't need to be very big. I usually think about interactions that I have with people that are important for me. What would you say you are grateful for then?
I think it was my biking to work or to this podcast. My battery was full, so I have an electric e-folding bike. It was a full-on battery, so it was like, yes, I don't have to worry about stuff. And just also, I bike through the fields, so I actually had the moment to bike and not stress about the children in front of me who are a little bit slower, that I had to manage around. But yeah, I'm grateful for that morning.
Mm-hmm. And you, Robyn?
I am really a person who runs on beautiful weather, so I'm very grateful for that the sun is shining. And another thing, I just went on a short city trip, and now coming back to work this day, I am much more enthusiastic or energized, and I think I'm grateful for also having the opportunity to take some time off, reload batteries, which also shows how important that is to get your work drive on again. And yeah, we are very thankful that you came here to share your story as a young researcher. So, Michalina, thank you very much for that, and hopefully we can take your advice also into practice.
Thank you.
Thank you, and see you around.
Thank you for listening to the last episode of Mental Health Matters.
It was quite a journey, wasn't it, Robyn?
Yeah, exactly. I think it really opened my eyes on certain points because it was really interesting just talking to PhD students who actually had the same experiences as I had at a certain point. I don't know if that is familiar for you.
Exactly. It's something we all experience, but talking with other students also from different fields, it's just striking how much we all relate to each other on those aspects. And we've got some very useful tips and advice as well. And for example, from Alice, one of our previous guests, she talked about the signature at the end of your email, and I just incorporated it as well. So now after my name, I just state that I might send my emails on irregular hours, but I just work flexible and I don't expect the others to respond immediately.
But also, for example, the breathing exercise we did with Sinead, it really helped me to, when I'm stressed or I'm a little bit over my head at a certain point, then to step back and take a deep breath, which really helped me to stay calm and to ground, like I think Giovanna also said to us, how to ground and just stay calm, which really helped me.
Thank you for being here with me, Robyn. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah, it was really a great experience. Thank you for listening to Mental Health Matters. We hope you got inspired by these stories on how to keep young researchers in a good mental shape. If you want to know more about these topics and KU Leuven Healthy, visit kuleuven.be/healthy. This podcast is brought to you by KU Leuven Healthy and produced by Chase Creative. Experience. Thank you for listening to Mental Health Matters. We hope you got inspired by these stories on how to keep young researchers in a good mental shape. If you want to know more about these topics and KU Leuven Healthy, visit kuleuven.be/healthy. This podcast is brought to you by KU Leuven Healthy and produced by Chase Creative.